Good evening and welcome to our second presentation of the year. I'm Brent Taylor, the convener of the Speaker Program for Military History and Heritage Victoria. On behalf of our committee, I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's Zoom event. The speaker tonight is Dr. Rosalie Triolo, and her topic will be From Books and Blackboards to Battlefields, Victoria's State School Teacher Soldiers in the Great War. A little bit about Rosalie. Most of you will know her, but I'll bring you up to speed. Rosalie has had a long distinguished career in academia, particularly related to professional learning and development of classroom resources for tertiary, secondary and primary education. She writes and presents widely on the history of Australian education, Australian history generally, and on World War I. She is a fellow and currently the Vice President of the Royal Historical Society of Victoria, as well as chair of its Historical Society Support Committee. From 2015, she's been Victoria's representative on the Council of the Australian National Museum of Education. Her award-winning doctoral thesis titled Our Schools and the War, Victoria's Education Department and the Great War of 1914 to 18 became a book of similar title and was commended in the Victorian Community History Awards 2012. She was awarded the Shrine of Remembrance Medal for outstanding contribution to community understandings of Victorian service and sacrifices in wars and peacekeeping. There's a lot more that I could say about Rosemary, but I think that you get a good taste for the spread and the depth and spread of her career. Now, for a little bit of process before Rosalie begins, she'll be answering questions at the end of the presentation. You can ask questions in one of two ways, or either of two ways, actually. You can post a chat message anytime up to and including question time and address the question to everybody. When the time comes, I'll read your question using whatever name appears on your computer identity, or you can wait and put your hand up during question time and I'll invite you to ask your questions verbally. Rosalie is happy for cameras to be on, but remember that everyone can also see you. Please make sure your microphones are switched off, and by now you should be on speaker view. And it's over to you now, Rosalie.
Well, I shall now share my presentation, and I think we should be right now. Yes, thank you. So thank you very much for your interest this evening. It's lovely to have so many familiar faces and good souls with me. So thank you very much. So where does my research begin? Because I'm going to get straight into it. I went to Brighton Primary School. I was a government school student there and later a teacher in government schools. And Anzac Day was always big in my schools. Wesley College claims former pupil Robert Grieve. Am I hearing someone else speaking? Sorry, I was getting some feedback then. Wesley College claims former pupil Robert Grieve as its own VC, but an interesting fact is that he went to Brighton State School beforehand, where his father, John Grieve, was a long-term teacher. Of Brighton State School, I remember in the 70s, the ABC radio Anzac Day services to which we listened solemnly annually. But this photo also, and this is the honour board that was in the foyer and which actually scared me as a child. It actually scared me. It was big and dark and what were all these lists of names? But I knew it was something significant. But this photo has also influenced my interest. My grandmother, who is the girl circled squinting in the sun next to the teacher, was a schoolgirl 1914 at Perth State School in Tasmania. And there are circles around two others of her sisters, Bessie in the middle, Dorrie over the other side by the male teacher, and Lloyd, who would go on to serve in World War II. The fact is This photograph was taken in 1916, and by that time, those 4 children, my grandma being one of them, had already lost an older brother in World War I. By 1918, that family would have lost a second brother. This photograph sat on my grandmother's dressing table in her marital bedroom and quite all her life, and it quite fascinated me. So when time came for me to secure permanency at Monash and do a PhD, I knew I wanted to do government schools in World War I. The convenience, though, for me in particular was that the Education Department of Victoria had one central bureaucracy presiding over everything and keeping extensive records. I commenced my research in 1999, completed it in 2008, but my fascination has not for one moment diminished. I am as interested in this topic now as I was all those years ago. I've also read independent, Catholic and Lutheran school histories, and not only for Victoria, but nationally. But the problem with researching them as a cohort is that they don't have overarching central bureaucracies. And of course, many of those schools have written their own histories. One of my conclusions from all that reading is that there are far more similarities between all school types experiences when it comes to men at the front than differences. And much of what I'll share today corresponds with all school types in many respects, although not all. And I'll conclude today with the similarities. So what have been my sources? There is the Education Department's record of war service, of which I buy them whenever I see them online. I've actually got 5. And I love the fact that they're usually dedicated to teacher soldiers or to the schools of World War I. The school paper, which I also collect when I find it online, the sorts of reading that students read over 100 years ago. Compulsory reading by teachers and by school students every month. And if Mike O'Brien was going to be here, I was going to do a little role play, making him be the teacher of the students, Jason and Brent, and just test what kind of a quality teacher he was and how good his students were. But I might have to save that for another time. So you can see the sort of material that students read in the school paper. Compulsory also was the Education Gazette and Teacher's Aid, which teachers were expected to read from front to back every month and initial after they'd read everything. Of course, they didn't read everything, but that was the process. And finally, what did a good school, an education department classroom look like? This is a famous photo from 1910, but it was published in 1914, 5 months before World War I, because it was deemed to represent a high-quality government school. It's Lindenau Railway Station School, because there were so many railway men near that station with their families in Gippsland, a school was built. And the interior was promoted as being as modern as it could be because it had a piano and pictures. So that's the big technology back then. And the students are learning about the life cycle of the mosquito, Cook's discoveries in the Pacific, and weights and measures in pounds, ounces, inches, and so forth. Finally, a shout out for local and school histories. They're often considered the work of amateurs, but they've provided gems to me. They often record information that can't be found in official documents, such as pupils' views of their teachers before and after the war, of pupils and other teachers' grief at the loss of fellow teachers and former senior pupils. They also capture teachers and pupils' reminiscences years later at back twos. And yes, there might be inaccuracies or biases in their reporting, but there can be the same in government records, can't there? And some disclaimers. I'm not generalising tonight that teachers, trainees, and the trainees was the term for student teachers back then, or senior pupils were better overall than Victoria's or Australia's carpenters or lawyers or plumbers or dentists. All would have had their own special achievements. But Victoria's government school teachers did exceed the nation's non-teachers in numerous respects, and that's why we're here. So who are our people? Sorry. My cohort consists of 769 departmental teachers, comprising just around about half of the 1,500 eligible aged men as in the department at the time. 720 were male teachers or lecturers and trainees, and the teachers were primary, higher elementary, high school, and junior, senior technical schools and Melbourne Teachers College. Interestingly, most were male primary school teachers. Most teachers and most primary school teachers back then were men. There's one inspector, 24 departmental clerks, 4 school office staff, 2 male school medical officers, 1 female domestic science cookery teacher, and 1 female school nurse who were included in the men that served. There are 700, okay, of that 769, 750 served in the Australian Army and or British Army, some on exchange. 14 served in the British Royal Flying Corps and or Australian Flying Corps, the beginning of the Australian Air Force, 1917. 3 served in the Royal Australian Navy on the basis of naval cadet experience. And there was the 1 nurse that served in the Australian Army Nursing Service and our cookery teacher who served in the Voluntary Aid Detachment. 16 male teachers who had left the department just previously were included in the tally. In summary, I've read and recorded every word, diary, letter or article I can lay my hands on pertaining to teachers, trainees and so forth. And the good news is that teachers, that all of those people basically wrote in diaries, wrote letters and wrote articles about fellow teachers, trainees and former pupils they met while on active service, and where possible wrote to their same peers on active service if they were convalescing or on leave or elsewhere. In their writings, my correspondents referred to the schools and perhaps the teachers' colleges where they'd trained or taught, and they often wrote back to those schools and colleges. They referred in their writing to the publications they'd read as pupils and as teachers, such as the school paper Education Gazette and their own school magazines, and they wrote to be published or simply ended up being published, perhaps without permission, sometimes with, in the school paper Education Gazette and their own school magazines. We have here 2 friends who enlisted. Private Norman Heathcote, you'll hear me mention him, and he had a really large set of letters that another teacher friend was able to pass to me. From his writings in particular, and all the teacher soldiers' correspondence, I've been able to discern 6 sets of experiences common to the department's men. For ease of expression, I'm going to call all of them teachers or teacher soldiers now, even if they were inspectors or lecturers or senior pupils who vacated schools because they were of the age and could straight away. The experiences are teacher as enlistee, as tourist, teacher soldier as tourist, as trainer of soldiers, as man at the front, as member of the education department community, and as teacher and student overseas. There are many more examples that I can give to support my claims than I can give in the time available, but I'm confident in my statements, even if I give only 1 or 2 direct quotes as indicative of each. Teacher as enlistee. Many teachers didn't record their reasons for enlistment. You, more than most audiences, know the enlistment reasons of all kinds, from deep patriotism of I must do my duty, through to less idealised reasons. But why did so many teachers and older students enlist directly from state government schools during the war? Well, I'm going to take you through the reasons. For some, or for many in fact, finding respectable employment and seeking financial gain certainly weren't motives. Teachers had good jobs and numerous did record their guilt at leaving their classrooms and their students. From early in the war, however, the department did promise to promote men on active service as if they were still teaching, and this may have helped some. Of course, though, there might have been other reasons. Most were patriotic, but have a look here at Philip Ormsby at Wangara State School in the Otways. A young man teaching 7 students, that is his school. War is declared. He enlists early in 1915 and dies somewhere in France. One wonders, did he enlist for patriotic duty or, with respect, was overseas more satisfactory to him than Wangara State School? I ask the question. But most also enlisted well before conscription and before the plebiscites. In most cases, I'd argue that patriotism, but also pressure, encouraged many men to enlist because they were teachers and in a big government school system. So, the pressures. Many of them read poems like this. Our teacher's gone away, he'll soon be at the front to keep the foe at bay and help to bear the brunt. He always loved to tell of men brave, pure and true, and now I feel full well he lived the life he drew. This poem just appeared on its own in the Education Gazette. In the school paper, there were regularly photos of orphans and starving children overseas. So the teachers are compulsorily teaching this content to their students. This poster had appeared originally in 1905, but it was reproduced, I should have put this, during the war years, and teachers were instructed to put it up in their schools. England expects that every man will do his duty. In the lead up to the war, 1910, patriotism of the soldier, just this one quote in a teacher journal, ready to die in order to defend or maintain the honour of the flag. John D. Burns's poem from Scotch College was reproduced, I've just got it there once, but numerous times. The bugles of England were blowing o'er the sea as they called 1,000 years, calling now to me. They woke me from dreaming in the dawning of the day. The bugles of England, and how could I stay? John Burns was killed early in the war, but his poem was reproduced often by the department. Here is a postcard that I've inherited from my grandmother, which she told me she took to school as her show and tell, that because 2 of her brothers had enlisted. So here's a powerful message in the classroom. Rudyard Kipling's poem, for all we have and are, for all our children's fate, stand up and meet the war, the Hun is at the gate. There were early fears that the Germans were going to invade Australia. And this is a milk jug cover that my grandma made in her Tasmanian school, Perth State School. All the girls were asked to make it. And look, Tasmania isn't even on the map. Our bit. The Director of Education in Victoria, Frank Tate, and the editor of the school paper, Charles Long, and the Education Gazette, Frank Tate had 2 sons serving overseas during the war. Charles Long had 4. All sons survived. I haven't discerned any special treatment, but you've therefore got 2 big leaders in the department supporting with their family the war effort. And of course, cadets was very much a responsibility in the school community. And here we have the Commonwealth Champion Cadet Corps 1912, promoted in the Education Gazette, and numerous of those boys went on to World War I. Teacher soldier as tourist. Historian Richard White was the first to argue that Australia's soldiers were more likely than others to treat at least part of their service as tourism. There was a strong tourism tradition in Australia as a wealthy migration-based society, and Australia was distant from the motherland. But the opportunity to visit Britain as well as Europe, which the teachers had learned about at length because they've had more formal schooling than most, then taught at length, and long after non-teachers had stopped reading about ancient Egypt and Britain, to me, especially appealed to the teacher cohort. The teachers contributed significantly to the descriptor of tourists through letters, postcards, and photographs with captions. Norman Heathcote's letters and album indicate that he took many photos during the war, but he knew early on that photography was discouraged, in fact forbidden. The collection of Captain Lindsay Ross of Ballarat Agricultural High School is almost identical to Heathcote's collection. And Lieutenant Christian Christensen of Conniva State School also took his travel experiences most seriously. Horticulture and photography were his hobbies, and the most valuable memento possessed by his mother is an album of beautifully finished snapshots taken by him on departure from Australia and arrival in France, published the department after his death. The teacher soldiers, however, proved to be a different cohort of tourists, educated. The men's longer experiences of education developed their capacities to be thoughtful, observant, especially descriptive, reflective, to draw on literature, and be more creative as well as witty in their responses. There were two main sets of tourism experiences: voyage by ship and adventures at destination. The department shared with its readers the voyage experience of most teacher soldiers, exactly as Heathcote had experienced it, as something of an enjoyable cruise. Lieutenant Cyril Isaac, the department supervisor of the gardening subject before enlistment, wrote to the department 6 days after embarkation how the sheet music the department had asked its pupils to collect for the voyages had been much enjoyed. Readers of the trainee magazine from Melbourne Teachers College learned how Major William Bateman of Maryborough High School played quoits and deck cricket. And readers of the magazine Hours at Melbourne High School learned about the opportunities to use the ship's stadium for boxing, skipping, throwing a medicine ball, and general fitness. The department, moreover, was convinced that travel and service overseas would strengthen the teachers' powers as teachers. I believe that happened, but that's another lecture. At the initial large Melbourne send-off at the Athenaeum, Director of Education Frank Tate was so positive he wrote that, on their return, the teacher soldiers will be expert teachers of geography, especially of the geography east of the Rhine. He's saying this even before the first ship has departed. So we're going to get straight away into German territory. And that in view of the need in Victoria for good teachers of modern languages, they should try to acquire a correct Berlin accent. Dr. John Smith, principal of the Melbourne Teachers College, also declared that war would enable friends and foes to better understand themselves and each other. By 1919, he believed he could see it. Returning men have visited many countries and seen how different peoples live. They have reflected on custom and language, war and peace, government and law, monarchy and republic. They have come back richer through the experience. And Lieutenant John Lyons of Cobrico State School, awaiting re-embarkation, agreed. He wrote to Melbourne High School, "I have seen much country and many people. No doubt it has been an education." During the war, the department put the tourist-like accounts and photos to good use for readings in the school paper as history and geography on the great cities, contemporary lifestyles, natural landscapes, agriculture, industries and architecture that the men were experiencing. Now, no doubt the teacher soldiers considered their heritage superior to that of the Egyptians and of other nationalities encountered overseas, even superior to the British by war's end. But collectively, the teachers used much less vernacular or racist language in their writing. Their writings may not have been strictly formal, but they were more formal than not and often copied the sort of language of the textbooks, school paper, and classrooms they had experienced. And of London, teachers' accounts, especially of Paris, Brussels, and London, were detailed and published in the school paper and Education Gazette. One unnamed former trainee for Melbourne Teachers College declared, "What a live thing history becomes when one stands in the chamber of the British Mother of Parliaments. One outcome of the war should be a deepening of interest and a more realistic teaching of certain subjects." My conclusion, the teachers were educated tourists and they were thinking and educating themselves and others during the war. Teacher soldier as trainer of soldiers. Heathcote and many teacher soldiers stood out to authorities as possessing the skills necessary to assist in initial or further training. But he found his role at Broadmeadows and in France so easy that he was irritated at being held up and kept there longer. Also, back in Victoria, several teachers and departmental service people were involved in establishing the Broadmeadows camp. Sergeant Ernest Smith, a long-time clerical employee of the department, had been instructed by General William Throsby Bridges and had been requested by the General only 13 days after war's declaration to establish Broadmeadows. James McLaren of Manningtree Road, Hawthorn State School, was often absent from school on army business, helping organise Broadmeadows training. And Lieutenant Claude Robinson of the part-time Colac and Upper Toowong schools declared his impatience at Broadmeadows. The War Record reported, "His ability as a teacher, cheery disposition and responsiveness soon won him promotion in the Broadmeadows camp. His worth as an instructor was recognised with the result that the authorities would not let him leave Victoria. The only means by which he could leave was to resign his commission and embark as a private in 1917. Claude's wish was to get to the front, as the War Record described, before describing also how he was killed soon after arriving in France." In summary, on the basis of War Record biographies, at least 22 teacher soldiers were chosen either on enlistment or during their service for specialist courses in frontline land-based warfare. Their courses included bomb throwing, bayonetry, musketry, machine gunnery, range finding, signals, motor transport, engineering, and anti-aircraft machine gunnery. Of that 22, 9 proceeded to teach the skills in which they became qualified. Yet, although their biographies don't make the point, at least another 29 must have undergone some degree of training as in land-based warfare, as well as in physical training and gymnastics. Teacher soldier as man at the front. Charles Bean wrote after the war that during a single day on the battlefront, men exhibit 20 times feelings which would not be disclosed once in a peaceful lifetime. You, as an audience, know more about that. Also, that captive in the trenches, men sought various means of dealing with their emotions. War artist Will Dyson wrote that in daily conversation, the men's language was usually thick with profanity and evasion to disguise deep feeling and weakness of emotion. Their written responses were much less profane, but as Joy de Mussy has argued, they tried to order the chaos that surrounded them. Firstly, the teacher soldiers as writers of experiences and feelings. Writing had formed a significant part of their academic and professional background. They wouldn't have passed their examinations to become teachers or would have been sacked if they couldn't write well. Writing had also been a recreational interest for many. So in keeping with the educated approach of the tourism genre, many described their experiences formally, in detail, and at times philosophically. Yes, they resorted to euphemism and black humour, but their careful wording also enabled letters to pass the censor whilst conveying to their readers sufficient descriptions of the battlefront. And in interviewing Norman Heathcote's daughter before she passed away, she said that her mother was able to read between the lines basically and glean additional information. In summary, for many teacher soldiers, the act of writing, especially with creative flair, even poetry, was a comforting reminder of a previous life and a therapeutic diversion. Some of the best examples come from Lieutenant Ken Cunningham of Fitzroy State School, who later became the first director of the Australian Council for Educational Research. For that reason, his writings were published professionally for someone like me to be able to locate decades later. Though years have passed and mighty forces fill the earth's whole round with bitter strife, though passion's power has held the hearts of men, oft blotting out the gentler thoughts of life, still at this time when memory's eye is clear, when man is called to higher thoughts than these, we think and long for all we hold most dear, our friends, our land in southern seas. That's a Christmas card he wrote, the poem on a Christmas card. And on one occasion, from a hilltop posting, Cunningham observed the destruction of flair. Watch that village in the hollow being converted into a desolation worse than the barest desert. Geyser-like clouds of dust and shower and debris start out of the ground with a breathless suddenness. Slowly the fantastic cloud spreads and dissipates and the rubbish tumbles back again, but there is no rest for the torn and tortured earth. Before the last particles have fallen, another hole is rent only a few yards away, then another and another. The very gates of hell are opened. We are watching the death throes of centuries of peaceful life and toil. Another well-written revelation was that of Lieutenant John Burke of Black Range State School, who entered a captured German dugout to find comforts parcels prepared by one or more German children. In a corner, an officer's cap was thrown on a heap of cake boxes. These boxes were of cardboard and sewn in with calico, just as the parcels come to us from Australia. The addresses were in a child's handwriting, as were one or two letters. In another corner was a coat rolled up. I opened it and found it stained with blood. Right between the shoulders was a burnt shrapnel hole telling a tragic tale. The owner of the coat was a German, and some might say not entitled to much sympathy. Perhaps he was not, but I could not help thinking sadly of the little girl or boy who had sent him the cakes. I have many more examples. An interesting point is that a significant number of teacher soldiers spoke openly about their fears and wounds, and the department enacted much less censorship than could have been its choice, and which many historians have simply assumed it did. This is significant considering numerous and forthright other matters that the department spoke about. War is not glorious, it claimed as early as June 1915. And it published teacher soldiers' accounts for the next 3.5 years. All my imaginings of the horrors and hardships of the war are here in reality. The Somme I am speaking of, wrote driver Arthur Jenquin of Warwickville West State School to his father. Picture to yourself, mud up to your thighs, impossible to walk through. Hundreds of horses have been lost through being unable to pull their legs out. My first trip sent my heart into my mouth. On the ride up, all around are the decayed remains of the dead, a skull here and a leg and other parts there. Hundreds have been buried here, but the shells bursting bring them to light. Thousands and thousands are away with trench feet. I see a fellow in the next battery now, shaking out a pair of decayed feet from long rubber boots. I have a couple of nasty septic sores. But gassing or slight gassing was also mentioned often. It smells like mustard and its pungent odour penetrates everywhere. Dugouts are particularly dangerous. It likes low places. At first there are no ill effects, but within 24 hours the eyes get bad, blisters form on the body, and lung troubles supervene, wrote Major William Elwood, MC of Hiawatha State School. Lieutenant E. Richardson of Northcote State School was praised by the department because he had admitted that he felt afraid as he beheld the German gas shells coming towards him, but they had the manliness to admit that fear. There were many references to the cruel and barbarous form of gassing, the quagmire of the Western Front, the slaughter terrible, the destroyed villages, and about bombed schools. An unnamed teacher soldier wrote, "In some towns over here, children never go to school without gas masks. Shells may fall or a cloud come over. They are within the sounds of guns all the time. I have seen little children playing about with our shells screaming overhead." Leadership and military subjects. Many men attracted to teaching were disposed to roles as communicators and motivators, and we will see that they were highly represented in the NCO ranks by the war's end. The subjects they taught, once again, they had been trained in cadets and drill, but it seems that many drew on their formal qualifications in first aid, health and hygiene, physical education, science and nature study. 43 men declared their requests to be stretcher bearers, and it seems put their first aid qualifications early. You know that many stretcher bearers died in those roles. Bravery. After the armistice, and as wartime copies of the school paper and education gazette were filed beyond view, I can still locate references. I think I've lost a page there. Numerous biographies refer to the men seeking the front in preference to posting in rear lines, or repeatedly raiding under heavy fire, or not retreating until multiple wounds, of which numerous had fatal or permanently life-altering consequences. Of course, a department is less likely, as is any reporting system, to record when people have not been so brave. But I believe from my own reading that there were enough heroic accounts. Two small sections and then we're nearing the end. Teacher soldier as member of the Education Department community. The department had never been more successful and active in nurturing a positive sense of community, I would say, than during the war. There are numerous explanations. People attracted to teaching in the years before and during the war were more uncritically loyal to their department and teaching and the system in which they worked. They'd been raised almost exclusively on the knowledge, skills and values they were agreeing to teach, and there were far less curriculum changes back then than there are now. Teachers were still teaching with the same materials that they had used when they were students. They worked in a system that employed them for so long as they agreed. But I still see a great deal of evidence about patriotism. And a strong sense of departmental community supporting its teachers. For starters, farewell events and gifts associated with their schools were deeply valued, and many good luck gifts became talismans. Letters. Once overseas, departmental letters and publications provided a powerful link with what was familiar and comforting. And the department regularly published letters and encouraged school students to write to their teachers, if not to any soldiers. But the school sent more than letters. They prepared rounds of parcels and gifts, masses. The scale and the imagination, the creativity could be a whole other lecture. But two examples only. The Melbourne Teachers College Christmas parcels generated much pleasure, according to a teacher from Maryborough High School, of Traralgon State School, of Irimple South State School, of the Melbourne Teachers College, all replied with gratitude, two of whom would die before the war was over. What were the contents in the Melbourne Teachers College parcels? Socks, a tin of shortbread, another of chocolate, a linen bag of almonds and raisins, some chewing gum, soap, bootlaces, safety pins, a toothbrush, some toothpaste, lanolin, a writing pad, a musical instrument, and we're talking some big musical instruments were sent over, Australian flag, washer and handkerchiefs. Of all things, Warrant Officer Albert Sullivan of Bullumwell State School made rude noises with his college's trumpet gift on a cold Gallipoli night. He would later lose an arm in France. And Melbourne High School sent scarves as talismans and colour photographs of home, receiving many thanks, from one teacher pupil even saying, "Thanks for the scarf. Can I have a school jumper?" Magazines were published and sent overseas. And this message from the school paper was reportedly seen up in a trench system. Quartermaster Sergeant Oswald Mills of Illawarra State School wrote from Gallipoli, "From time to time, copies of the school paper have arrived, and on one occasion, the message published in the school paper about the Dardanelles was posted up in several places along the firing line." The school paper also circulated in overseas military hospitals. Whilst recovering in London, Brigadier General Walter McNichol of Geelong High School was gratified to read all about the Gallipoli landing in which he'd played part. And the records suggest that the teacher soldiers appreciated all such gestures, as well as Frank Tate's personal letters. Significantly, the magazines and education department not only provided details of life at home, but often conveyed details of life at the front. So Education Gazette magazines that were being sent overseas were a means by which the teachers could learn that some of their peers had been killed. School visits. Some soldiers, usually the wounded, returned to their schools during the war to address teachers and other community members to motivate continued support. Equally, schools were very happy to host their returned men. Dr. John Smith at the Teachers College had announced at an assembly that one of the college's serving graduates had the fortitude to win a Victoria Cross, and was proven correct when Captain Frank McNamara of North Kuwirup State School became the first and only Australian airman of the Great War to do so. And this is a famous photo of his ordeal. I don't have time to talk about it, sorry, but Septimus Power's artwork. And teachers kept meeting other teachers and former pupils. Captain Reginald Woods of Marysville State School had his statement published in the school paper. Since I have been here, I've met quite a number of fellow teachers, and they are all well and in the best of spirits. But Private Septimus Elmore of Malvern State School, who taught the famous historian Weston Bate, and Weston Bate adored Sep Elmore, wrote, we abhor the scourge of war. Nonetheless, since we have seen with our own eyes the wrecks it makes of vigorous, promising men, many of them our fellow teachers. Major Herbert Wilson, OBE, MC, the lecturer in nature study at the Teachers College, summarised during the war, God bless you all at the Education Department for your thoughtfulness in the work you have all done in making your old boys into one big family. Finally, the returned teacher soldiers. A manifestation of the department's community post-war was when some returned soldiers sought to create a Returned Soldier Teachers Association. By July 1919, it was calling itself the Returned Soldier, Sailor and Nurse Teacher Association, seeking to include the two female employees. Here is Sister Margaret Waterstrom, and here is Beryl Kagan, the voluntary aid detachment from the Domestic Science Cookery School, who at number 14 Australian General Hospital did not cook 700 meals a day, but at one stage was in charge of organising the system and the supplies to produce 700 meals. The association demanded official and ongoing recognition, but Frank Tate replied that the men had been given automatic promotion while on service. However, the initials RS would be put on their teacher profiles, their cards, and they would be they should be accorded sympathetic treatment when going for promotions. The evidence suggests that the teacher soldiers and former pupils at the front felt part of a large and connected community. Last category, and I know I'm pushing time here. The teacher soldiers often wrote in scholarly fashion, I've said that, but they also, whilst overseas, acted as both teachers and students. When on leave in Egypt, France, Belgium and Great Britain, many took opportunities to visit schools. After the war, some also visited schools as a consequence of the Imperial Union of Teachers Conference. The conference aimed to give opportunities for the exchange of ideas of the teachers from the dominions. The talents of Ken Cunningham, Fitzroy State School, later the ACER director, must have been sufficiently well known late in the war for him to be asked to organise lectures and classes for his unit. He did so with his friend Lieutenant Ernest Pedrick of Langy Logan State School. Their scheme began before the official one that Monash presided over, and which Brigadier General Walter McNichol of Geelong High School helped Monash organise. Bean later praised McNichol's final report as The best record of the scheme, also that no part of the AIF's war effort has more richly repaid the nation. And Lieutenant Gabriel Jenkins of Ashby State School was given a major responsibility organising the education programs on the transports returning to Australia. The war record describes how 12 teacher soldiers as students enrolled in the AIF scheme, 8 of whom indicated through their biographies what they found interesting, and this included wool classing and beekeeping. But most men were teachers in it. At least 33 Victorian state school teacher soldiers taught in England, France and Belgium, or on transports home, often teaching the very subjects found in Victoria's state schools. To conclude, my research into the education department, and which I'm not saying they're the only teachers that had these experiences, in fact, I'm saying this was probably common for many teachers. Of the department's men, compared to national averages, 50% of the department's eligible aged men enlisted, compared to 39% of Australia's non-teachers. They were far more likely to enlist early than late in the war. They were more likely to be officers and non-commissioned officers by war's end than Australia's non-teachers. 30% versus, versus 22% Australia's non-teachers. They were more likely to receive military honours, decorations and other awards. 13% of the cohort earned them compared to 4% of Australia's non-teachers, and that statistic includes all nurses who received OBEs and so forth. And they were slightly more likely to die on active service. I know I'm comparing vastly different cohorts, but there was a 28% death rate compared to 18% Australia's non-teachers. To say that the department was a second family would be an exaggeration, but the records suggest that the leadership created a community that was supportive of and valued by many teachers. The department had assumed the men's preparedness to self-sacrifice and with it the responsibility for supporting them. It encouraged their communication of personal and professional kinds, created networks and distributed their accounts. It encouraged the men's development of soldiers, teachers and students. It celebrated their achievements and bore something of the enormous weight of their physical and emotional pain and grief. And it didn't let go. It held on. It kept honouring its teacher soldiers long after the war. During the war, the department had supported grieving soldiers and family members, friends and associates of the deceased. It intensified its support for those still grieving in the early post-war period. And it embarked on honouring and memorialising those many others who, despite Ken Cunningham's claim, sadly, tragically, never returned to the sunny land in the south. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalie. That was tremendous. We're running a little short of time, so
I know, and I'm happy to take emails, questions afterwards.
Let's have the questions first. Would you mind just turning your presentation off, please? Excellent, thank you. Now, there's some things come up on chat from H.H. Bazarin. Do you think if Australia got involved in a war today to the extent as in World War I, do you think schools would be as willing to support the war effort as they did then? If not, what has essentially changed in your view?
Okay. I think that a lot was learned. That's a very big question. A lot was learned from two wars. World War II, the Education Department looked back on what it had done in World War I. In World War I, that same department had looked back on what it had done during the Boer War. by the time the Vietnam War came around, and I've only dabbled a little in the Vietnam War, teachers weren't as willing to give so fully and wholly, and especially as the conscription issues and so on continued. No, the world has changed. There is less uncritical loyalty. But I'm not saying that the support of the war effort back then was a bad thing, at least in terms of the patriotism of people caring for their own. It's a big question from John. I can't answer that quickly and easily.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, Hatice, sorry.
That's yes, Hatice. Well, it seems like you answered everything. It was so. Thank you very.
Are there no other questions? Well, can I just show one slide again? Can I just screen share one slide? I know we're running out of time. I just want to share one slide. So, at the Melbourne Cricket Club, my husband partner Brian was at the cricket club in January for the cricket, and he knows what I'm like, and he saw this particular panel, and it states the greater game, about 1,100 MCC members, 1/5 of all members enlisted to fight in World War I. And the paragraph underneath says, the sense of duty and patriotism taught at private schools and cadet programs saw members take on leadership roles and serve with distinction. Patriotism was not only taught in private schools. It was taught, there's nuances and complexities in Catholic schools. It was taught in Lutheran and Quaker schools, and it was taught in private schools. And I'm not saying either or, and I'm not saying that one is better or the other, but duty and patriotism were definitely taught in state schools in World War I. So if anyone has any connections with the Melbourne Cricket Club and would like, I'm not going to go in there and upset anyone, and I'm not going to be, thrown off the premises at the end or anything, but I would love to give a presentation similar to this if they would like to hear it from me. Has that stirred any responses?
But perhaps, Rosalie, you could assume from that they're indicating that MCC members were predominantly from private schools.
And they may well be, but they might not all have been, because a century ago, when the government schools first began, certainly the blue blood families would still send their children to blue blood schools, but I can tell you that a century ago, when the government schools began, the parents who were struggling to send their children to private schools withdrew them from private schools and sent them to government schools.
Yep. All right. So thank you for that. And I'd like also to comment. There's a rare thing happened tonight. You ended up with more people listening than you started with. So that's very unusual. We ended up with 26 and we started with 24 we normally lose a few along the way. So we didn't lose anyone, we gained it. So thank you very, very much. And a credit to your presentation.
Oh, thank you. And it's just lovely to see so many people here and people I know. And I just thank you for your interest. I thank you for your interest.
Right.
Thank you.
Great job, Rosalie. Great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of little. Oh, sorry. You
go on. I just hope to see you. I'll see you all around. We'll meet.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I've got one last little bit of business, which is talking about the next presentation. Our next speaker will be Dr. Gregory Blake, and he'll be speaking on his 4th military book about Killer Bees, the Australian Independent Companies and Commandos at War, 1942 to 1945. That'll be a Zoom speaker event as usual on the 17th of July 2024. So look out for the website. It's already up. You can see on the screen. And that's it from me. Brings this evening session to a close. Thanks, Rosalie. As I said, more people listening than at the end and beginning. Thanks to Jason, who, as always, keeps things going on behind the scenes. And
thank you
all.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was great.
Yep. Thank you all for joining us. Hope
Thanks,
you come
everyone.
Again. Yeah, and good night from the committee and myself.
Well done,
Good
Brent.
night. Thank you.
Good night.